Today, we build my new custom keyboard. With more layers than an ogre, it should sound phenomenal. With an entry-level price, there's a quirk.
That's weird.
Or two.
Get wrecked.
But if it can hit its claimed 2.8 milliseconds response time for gaming, that just might make up for any downfalls.
That's his best run yet. Let's start with the base with a high 75 from Leobog Barebones kit.
Nice.
The CNC'd aluminium body is spray painted blue with an etched satin logo. There's a magnetic mirror finish tile with the company's logo that can be flipped over to blank, and a knob that can be turned and pressed. On the back we have a USB-C port and an included coily cable. I'm not a fan of the red plastic knob, it's just a strange choice which limits matching your setup. I'm truly fascinated by all the layers inside these keyboard kits that all contribute to the feeling, but mostly the sound. Even a PET sheet adhered to the 4mm thick pour-on foam. So from the bottom up, we have our aluminium base, a USB-C daughter board, that thick pour-on foam, our PCB, and with this being the RGB version, we've got another thin sheet of clear plastic, a thin sheet of foam, another thick sheet of foam, our slotted positioning plate with pre-lube stabilizers, gasket mounted by the foam on the edges, and finally, the aluminium top. Before I screw it back together, I'm going to do a quick mod. So we can see there's about a 0.3 of a mil gap between the metal around the outside, which is great, but I'm just going to add some tape to the standoffs to ensure there's no metal on metal contact causing unwanted resonance. For this build, I picked Otemu Panda mechanical switches. Now these are tactile, so there's a physical bump you press through at the actuation point, opposed to linear switches which are smoothed all the way through. This is probably the greatest personal preference choice when it comes to picking your parts. Now this slotted positioning plate makes installing switches a tedious task. You have to pry each side to make sure they're properly clipped in. It seems overly flexible to me, but I guess all of this pays off when it comes to the sound. The keycaps I chose have an off-white inspired design language, and there's a lot of cool coloured modifiers to choose from. However, there is an issue with them, and I want to see if you can spot it, especially when we test the RGB. G'day, I'm Cam, and before we plug in the keyboard, just need to pay the bills and tell you about today's sponsor, PCBWay.com. If your projects need a custom PCB, part CNC'd, or 3D printed, then simply upload your file to PCBWay.com, select the material, color, and quality, and you'll get an instant quote for it to be manufactured and shipped to you. Big thanks to PCBWay for sponsoring today's video. The final build step is to check that all the keys work with a key tester. Ooh. If they don't, most likely the pins of a switch got bent when they were pushed in. Or... Windows... Why was Windows Lock on out the box? Okay, so the keyboard's built, all the keys work. Your next step would be to go get the software, right? So you'll type in the website, it's on the box, leobog.com, and doesn't load. If I ping the domain, the server responds, but just doesn't with the website. So I VPN'd over to China to see if that would make a difference, and it didn't. So thankfully, WhatGeek, the online store that sent me this keyboard for review, have a downloads page. Then we have access to the software, we can finally customize the keyboard. For me, I don't like the delete key being next to the backspace. On a traditional keyboard, it's next to the backslash. You can now click in the software and change them to match what I've got in real life. However, they've used a photo of the keyboard instead of a digital render. So when you change the key, it doesn't actually change what it says on the screen. You have to hover over with the mouse for a little pop-up to tell you what it used to be and what it now is. That's weird. But there's a gotcha. If you hover over the keys in the function mode, it doesn't pop up to tell you what their default keybind is. In the manual, it highlights that if you go function Q, that'll switch into Android mode. That's right, there's an Android mode in here. Function W is Windows, function E is Mac, and function R is iOS. And so it's very easy to accidentally override that if it doesn't prompt you to say that key already does something. But what I don't get is that you can change a critical mode switching keybind, but you can't change the function row. Seriously, no matter how I click, it's just the whole F1 to F12, they're hard locked. As you can see, I've changed a bunch of keycaps so I could use them as custom macros and keybinds, but I guess get wrecked. Look, I would email them about it, but all I've got here is a phone number for somewhere in probably China and a website that doesn't load, so no. The knob has two modes, and like the function keys, you can't change what it does. If the LED is solid, then it's in office mode, which means a twist will do volume and a press will mute. If you press and hold, it switches to gaming mode, where it will now pulse, which means a twist will change the brightness of the RGB and a press will cycle through. Out the box, the LED was off, so I had to read the manual to realize that function backspace toggles the LED on and off to actually see what mode it was in. But yeah, in gaming mode, you can tap it to cycle through all the built-in RGB effects. In the software, you can go to self-define and you can create and paint by by selecting a key and changing its color. But what did surprise me though is that there is a music mode. So if you have this toggled on, it'll react to your system sounds as long as the software is open. Now, do you spot the keycap issue? See, I was looking at them and I was like, why do they look like the Hollywood Hills? Each key is not straight. And so I took off some caps and ensured that all of the switches are fully clipped in, but they still weren't straight. So I tried some different switches and they still weren't straight. And so I put on some different keycaps and they were straight. Okay. And so I took a letter that was too high on one row and swapped it with a letter that was too low on another, and now that letter is too high on that row. And so it seems these budget keycaps have warped as they cooled from their mold. Now this keyboard claims to have a gaming mode, so I hooked it up to my latency tester to see if that's true. Now these initial results aren't bad, but the manual says we can make them faster with the driver. It took me a while to figure this out, but it actually means the debounce setting in the software. Now debounce is when you press on a mechanical switch, two pieces of metal are pressed together. However, with force behind the connection, there's a chance it's going to bounce back ever so slightly to disconnect and then reconnect the circuit. And so the processor on the keyboard is running a bit of debouncing code to ensure that multiple key presses aren't sent accidentally. And so by changing the setting, we can reduce latency with a less strict debounce check. That's its best run yet.
Out the box, the keyboard is set to 3 stages of debounce, so you definitely can reduce your input lag by switching it down to 1. And if we take a closer look at our actual keystroke readings, you can see we have one really fast response time, which was actually 4.9 milliseconds. Now, there is up to 2 milliseconds of response time added to the latency tester's relay mechanism. And so if we subtract that from our readings, then it's very possible that the manufacturer was able to achieve 2.8 milliseconds at least once in their testing. Also, I haven't noticed any issues when running one stage of debounce with the Otemu Panda switches. However, the mechanics of other switches may cause false readings. Now, on the topic of picking parts, the Leobog Hi 75 Barebones kit is a great value buy, especially for the sound. You could definitely find a cheaper set of switches than the Pandas, but I've definitely enjoyed using them. And I'll definitely skip on the keycap set because the quality control is shocking.
Now, a big reason for these custom keyboards is to customize the look and feel. Shameless plug. That's why I've also built my own mouse, 3D printed it, took a while to design. Check out that video after this one. But it can also be for the sound. Here's a quick comparison to my previous build. And to a common gaming keyboard. I love this sound. At the end of the day, a keyboard's a tool. As long as it types and does its job, then what more could you ask for? However, I am enjoying customizing and finding my specific preference. If you liked today's video, thumbs if you loved it, sub it, and then check out my custom mouse build that's on the screen, as well as some other tech projects there. Bye.